The knock at my door was sharp, almost angry, cutting through the Portland rain like a blade. I had just set my coffee down, the steam still curling in the dim light of my corner apartment overlooking the Willamette River. When I opened the door, they stood there. Margaret, in a tailored coat that screamed silent judgment, Nathan lounging beside her with that infuriating smirk that always made me feel like an inconvenience in my own life. "Madeline," my mother said, stepping in without waiting for an invitation, her perfume sharp and invasive. "We need to talk." Nathan brushed past me too, his boots dripping muddy water onto my hardwood floor. I stood frozen for a second, the cold air from the hallway swirling around my ankles, carrying the familiar chill of obligation and guilt. They acted like they owned the place, like every piece of furniture, every square foot of space was theirs to assess and claim. Margaret's gaze flickered over my apartment with thinly veiled disdain, as if calculating what could be sold off if necessary. Nathan, meanwhile, perched himself on my kitchen counter, picking at an apple from the fruit bowl like a lazy king surveying his domain. I crossed my arms, bracing myself. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Margaret smiled, a tight, brittle thing. "It's simple, darling. Nathan has a new business opportunity. Very promising. He just needs a little startup capital. You're doing well now." Her eyes gleamed with something that wasn't pride. It was hunger. I felt it in the air. Thick and oily, the same old expectation. Give. Sacrifice. Bleed. Nathan chuckled, tossing the apple from hand to hand. "Come on, Mads," he said casually. "It's not a big deal. Just a little help for family. You know, like always." I stared at them, the room closing in, the windows fogging up from the sudden surge of heat in my chest. Memories crashed into me. Birthdays where I handed over my gift money so Nathan could attend soccer camp, late nights working 2 jobs while he wrecked his car and needed another, skipped proms, missed chances, dreams postponed indefinitely because Nathan always came first. I shook my head slowly, feeling the weight of 32 years settling on my shoulders. "No," I said quietly but firmly. Margaret blinked, genuinely surprised, as if the idea of me refusing had never once entered her calculations. Her lips tightened into a hard, bloodless line. "Don't be selfish, Madeline. This is what family does." I laughed, a hollow sound in the still air. "When have you ever done anything for me?" I asked, my voice cracking like thin ice. Margaret's face flushed, but she recovered quickly, her voice dropping into that patronizing tone I knew too well. "We raised you. We gave you everything." I took a step closer, feeling something inside me burn brighter than fear for the first time in years. "You raised me to survive you," I said, each word falling heavy between us, and I did. "Without you." Nathan scoffed from the counter, tossing the half-eaten apple into the sink. "Jesus, Mads, you think you're better than us now?" I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. "No," I said, my voice soft but steady. "I've always known I was." The silence that followed was colder than the rain. Margaret's eyes glittered with rage. "Blood is blood," she hissed. "Without us, you'd be nothing." I moved to the door, opening it wide to the dreary, wet city beyond. "Then you'll be fine without me," I said, nodding toward the hallway. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Margaret stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. Nathan muttered something under his breath, but followed her out, shoulders hunched against the drizzle. The door clicked shut behind them with a finality that echoed in my chest. I leaned against the door, breathing hard, the smell of rain and anger thick around me. It was over, I thought, wiping my hands on my jeans. Finally, after all these years, it was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. Monday came with a gray sky heavy enough to crush the city. I was reviewing contracts at the office when the receptionist, pale and hesitant, approached my desk. In her trembling hands was an envelope, thick and official-looking. "I'm sorry, Madeline," she whispered, eyes darting away. "You need to sign for it." A man in a dark suit waited behind her, smiling in a way that made my skin crawl. I scrawled my name mechanically, my fingers stiff and cold. He tipped an imaginary hat and left, leaving the scent of smug satisfaction in his wake. I retreated into the break room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like 1,000 tiny wasps, and tore open the envelope. The first line hit me like a punch to the gut: petition for conservatorship based on mental incompetence. I sat down hard, the plastic chair screeching against the tile, the document trembling in my hands. I wasn't just being pushed aside. They were trying to erase me legally, declare me unfit, take control of my life, my finances, everything I had clawed and bled to build. The words on the page blurred, but the memories they triggered were sharp and brutal. Childhood flashes, Nathan setting the kitchen curtains on fire and being praised for his creativity while I was grounded for forgetting a homework assignment. Margaret telling neighbors how brilliant Nathan was while pretending I barely existed. Birthday parties where he blew out the candles on my cake. I learned young that love in our family was a transaction, a ledger constantly balancing, and my balance was always in the red. But I had also learned something else. Survival required receipts. At 11, after Margaret accused me of stealing her bracelet, a bracelet Nathan had pawned for weed money, I started recording everything, hiding tiny recorders in sock drawers, backing up files on flash drives, emailing copies to accounts they didn't know existed. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. And now that arsenal was my lifeline. I raced home through the Portland drizzle, my mind a storm of fear and fury. Inside my apartment, I slammed the door and locked it behind me, as if I could physically keep the betrayal at bay. Dropping the envelope on my kitchen table, I yanked my old laptop from the closet, the battered machine whirring to life with the loyalty of an old soldier. I opened the files, carefully labeled gaslighting, threats, manipulation. My own voice, young and shaking, filled the room from a recording. I didn't take it, Mom. I swear. Margaret's icy response followed. Don't embarrass us, Madeline. Just admit it. Help Nathan. His laughter echoed faintly in the background. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unstable. I had just been raised by people who needed me to believe I was. My hands stopped trembling. I stared out the window at the city blinking through the rain, at the future I had built with no thanks to them, and I knew. They had come for me with lies, but they had taught me how to fight. I wouldn't let them win. Not this time. I picked up my phone, heart hammering against my ribs. There was only one person I could trust with this. Someone who had seen the cracks long before I ever dared admit they were there. Eli answered on the second ring, his voice sharp and steady. Madeline, what's wrong? I exhaled shakily, the words burning as they tumbled out. They're trying to put me under conservatorship. They're saying I'm unfit. Silence crackled across the line. Then Eli swore softly under his breath. Send me everything, he said, his voice like steel. Every file, every recording. We're going to bury them. For the first time that day, I smiled. Not because it was over, but because I knew the real battle was just beginning, and I was ready. The city hummed with the low growl of distant traffic as I sat on my living room floor, laptop open. Files spread around me like the pieces of a shattered life. Eli was already working, his tech skills slicing through data management like a hot knife through butter. First things first, he said. Typing rapidly, we organize everything. Chronology matters. He wasn't just calming me, he was building a wall between me and the storm that was coming. I pulled a battered photo album from a storage bin, one-eyed unearthed from my parents' attic years ago, mostly filled with half-forgotten Christmases and stiff, uncomfortable family portraits. Nestled between faded pictures was a Polaroid that made my breath hitch, a younger Margaret, smiling awkwardly beside a woman with my same sharp jawline, my same dark eyes. The back of the photo, written in rushed, fading ink, read, Claire. Don't tell Derek. My hands shook slightly as I stared at the name. Claire Montrose, a name I had heard only once in a hushed argument behind a closed door. A name erased from family stories like a stain scrubbed too hard. A quick search confirmed it. Claire Montrose, family law attorney, operating out of Beaverton, just a 20-minute drive west. I closed the laptop, grabbed my keys, and drove into the rain, the photo clutched in my hand like a lifeline. Beaverton blurred by outside the windshield, suburban streets wet and glistening under the endless Oregon drizzle. The receptionist at the law office hesitated when I walked in, dripping water onto the polished hardwood floor. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, polite but wary. I swallowed, nerves fraying. "No," I said, holding out the photo, "but it's about Margaret Harper." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or warning. "Wait here," she said, disappearing behind a heavy oak door. 10 agonizing minutes later, the door opened and Claire stepped out. She was older now, silver streaks cutting through her dark hair, but her posture was as straight as a blade. Her gaze, when it landed on me, softened slightly. "Madeline," she said, her voice low and cautious. "I didn't think Margaret kept this photo." I handed it to her without a word, watching as her fingers tightened around the edges. We sat across from each other in her small but elegant office, papers rustling quietly as I pulled out the conservatorship petition. Claire scanned it quickly, her expression hardening by the second. "This is serious," she said, finally, tapping the document with a manicured finger. "They're not just trying to control your money. They're trying to erase your autonomy, your future." I met her eyes without blinking. "That's why I'm here. I need someone who knows how they operate, someone they already tried to silence." Claire leaned back slowly, studying me. For a moment, I thought she might refuse, might tell me to run and never look back. But then she smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "You came to the right place," she said. "Do you have evidence?" I opened my laptop, my hand steadier now. I showed her the folders. Voicemails, texts, financial documents, recordings of Nathan's drunken rants, Margaret's chilling manipulation. Her eyes sharpened with every file I opened, like a hawk zeroing in on prey. "Send me everything," she said, her voice like iron wrapped in velvet. "We'll file a response, request an independent evaluation, and start dismantling their lies piece by piece." Relief crashed over me so violently I almost sagged into the chair. I wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in years, I had an adult in my corner who wasn't trying to use me, fix me, or break me. But we needed more. Back in my apartment, Eli was waiting, sorting through more digital evidence. "You know who else you should talk to?" he said, glancing up. "Jenna Lawson, Nathan's ex. She saw things you might not even know about." The thought of reaching out made my stomach knot with old shame, but necessity was a sharper blade than fear. I found Jenna's contact info tucked away in an old email thread, took a deep breath, and sent the message. Her reply came faster than I expected. "Come by. I have something you'll want to hear." The next morning, I stood outside her small apartment complex, the rain still clinging to the sidewalks like regret. Jenna opened the door, arms crossed, expression wary. She looked different, harder, sharper than I remembered. "Why now?" she asked without preamble. I met her gaze evenly. "Because you know what kind of person Nathan is, and I think you're tired of pretending you don't." For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she stepped aside, letting me in without another word. Jenna's apartment was small, clean, and smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant. A dog barked from a back room, its nails clicking against the hardwood floors. She tossed a hoodie over a laundry pile and sat across from me, legs bouncing nervously. "I don't know why I'm doing this," she muttered, rubbing her palms against her jeans. I leaned forward, heart pounding. "Because you know the truth, and you're tired of carrying it alone." For a long moment, Jenna just stared at me, her eyes hollow with old wounds. Then she nodded. "Thanksgiving, 2 years ago, at your parents' place." She swallowed hard. "Nathan was drunk, bragging about your promotion, saying you thought you were better than everyone. Margaret was right there, egging him on." She stood abruptly, rummaging through a drawer and pulling out a battered flash drive. I had my phone on me. Baby monitor picked it up, caught the whole thing. She held it out to me like it burned. Take it. My fingers brushed hers as I grabbed the drive, its weight heavier than its size. There's more, Jenna said, voice breaking. Margaret told me you were unstable, that if Nathan needed to, he could handle you. Legally. She said they had a plan. My stomach twisted into a knot, so tight it felt like I couldn't breathe. I closed my fist around the flash drive, feeling its sharp edges bite into my skin. Did you believe her? I asked, barely above a whisper. Jenna's face crumpled slightly. No, not really. But I didn't do anything either. I left with the flash drive clutched like a weapon, the Portland rain seeping into my jacket as I ran back to my car. Back home. Eli was sprawled on the floor, sifting through files when I burst through the door. His eyes widened at the sight of me. What did you find? He asked. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop without answering, letting the recordings fill the room. Nathan's drunken voice, Margaret's cold reassurances, the toxic symphony of a family building their case against me years before they ever filed a petition. This voicemail, Eli said, pointing to a new file. Listen. I clicked it, and Margaret's voice oozed from the speakers. You're just like your aunt, always ruining everything. I blinked, ice sliding down my spine. My aunt? Eli's eyebrows knitted together. Claire, he said slowly. She exists. They lied about her. The realization was a thunderclap. If they lied about Claire, what else had they buried? We worked late into the night, sorting files, cross-referencing dates, building a digital fortress of evidence. As I sifted through an old box of documents, a battered manila envelope slipped free and fell open at my feet. Inside, a crumbling birth certificate from 1995. My name, Derek Harper, listed as my father, but clipped to it, almost forgotten, was a notarized letter in Margaret's sharp, angry handwriting, hinting that Thomas Green, a man I had never met, might actually be my biological father. The world tilted under my feet. I sank into the couch, the paper fluttering in my lap like a dead leaf. All these years, they had tied me to Derek for one reason, to claim me as part of the Harper family trust. If I wasn't legally Derek's daughter, I wasn't entitled to anything. And worse, they had no standing to file conservatorship against me. I drove back through the night, the rain a relentless drumbeat on the windshield, heading toward the place I had sworn never to return, the Harper house in Eugene. I still had a key. Margaret never thought I'd use it against her. The house was dark when I slipped inside, the smell of lemon cleaner thick and cloying. Upstairs, the attic door groaned as I pushed it open. Dust motes danced in the weak beam of my flashlight. I remembered the attic from childhood, forbidden, dangerous, filled with boring old papers Margaret said no one should touch. I found the safe behind a stack of plastic Christmas bins, exactly where I remembered. My fingers spun the dial, heart hammering in my ears. Click. It opened. Inside, yellowed tax returns, legal documents, and another envelope labeled in shaky handwriting. For Madeline. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside, a letter. Claire's handwriting. Madeline, if you're reading this, I failed you, but you're stronger than they ever believed. You deserve the truth. Tears blurred my vision as I pulled out the rest of the contents. Photographs, notarized affidavits, hidden paternity test results. Thomas Green, my real father. Proof that Margaret had forged documents to siphon trust money through me to Nathan. The attic seemed to close in around me, the air thick with mold and betrayal. I stuffed the papers into my bag and fled down the stairs, the old floorboards groaning under my weight. I wasn't just fighting for my money anymore. I was fighting for the truth of who I was, and I wasn't going to lose. The next morning smelled like betrayal masked with lemon cleaner. I pulled into the driveway of the Harper house, my stomach twisting with a nausea that no amount of deep breathing could ease. Court-mandated mediation. Claire had insisted it was strategic. Let them talk, she had said, her voice sharp. They'll hang themselves faster than we ever could. I adjusted the folder in my hands, thick with evidence, and stepped into the lion's den. Margaret greeted me at the door with a brittle smile. Madeline, she purred, you look tired. I stepped past her without answering, every nerve in my body screaming at me to leave, but I forced myself forward. Derek sat slumped in the living room, clutching a chipped mug, refusing to meet my eyes. Nathan leaned against the fireplace, his grin lazy and cruel. The mediator, a composed woman in her 50s, opened her notebook. Let's begin. Margaret started immediately, her voice syrupy sweet. We love our daughter very much, she said, laying a trembling hand over her heart. But she's been making reckless decisions, isolating herself, spending irresponsibly. We're just trying to help. I almost laughed out loud at the sheer audacity. Like accusing us of theft, Margaret added, tilting her head, her eyes glinting with calculated innocence. I slid a printed email across the table, the edges crisp and cold. It was dated 2 years ago, Margaret asking me to co-sign a $20,000 loan for Nathan. When I refused, her reply was brutal. You're a selfish little girl who will die alone. The mediator's eyebrows lifted slightly. Margaret's smile faltered, but she didn't break. I pulled out another document, a text from Nathan. Send me $5,000 or I'll ruin you. Don't test me. I laid it on top of the email like a dagger. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his chair. You're blowing this out of proportion, Derek mumbled, staring into his coffee. I turned toward him, heart pounding, hand slipping into my bag for the grenade I'd been waiting to drop. Did you know, I said slowly, that I'm not your biological daughter? The room froze. Nathan straightened up, confused. Margaret went stark white. Derek blinked, like I'd slapped him. What are you talking about? He stammered. I didn't flinch. Margaret had an affair with Thomas Green. I'm his daughter. You changed my birth certificate in 1995 to tie me to the Harper Trust. You filed for conservatorship based on a fraud. Margaret shot up from her chair, her voice shrill and cracking. This is ridiculous. She's lying. The mediator held up a hand, her face tight. Let's pause. No, I said, my voice slicing through the tension. We finish this. Margaret leaned across the table, her face twisted with rage. You think you can destroy us? You're nothing but a bitter little girl with daddy issues. I stood, gathering the folder into my arms. No, I said, voice calm and deadly, I'm a woman with evidence. I turned to Derek one last time. Did you know? I asked. He looked at me, real fear dawning in his eyes, and then he looked away. Margaret answered for him, her voice dripping venom. He knew. He just didn't care, as long as the money stayed where it should. Claire's voice, cool and lethal in my memory, whispered, They underestimate you. Not anymore. 3 days later, the King County Courthouse loomed overhead, its columns slick with rain. Inside, the smell of polished wood and fear permeated the air. Margaret, Nathan, and Derek sat stiffly at the petitioner's table, their lawyer, a smug man named Carson Rose, straightening his tie with false confidence. Your Honor, Carson began, the Harper family seeks conservatorship out of concern for Madeline Harper's mental well-being. She has demonstrated erratic, paranoid behavior. Claire rose to her feet before he could finish, her voice slicing the air. Objection, Your Honor. No medical evidence has been submitted. No history of instability. My client maintains a $125,000 annual income. No outstanding debts, no criminal record. The judge's eyes narrowed. Proceed. Carson floundered, muttering about a $2,000 couch I had purchased. Claire leaned forward smoothly. My client's income supports that purchase. The Harper family's financial struggles stem not from Madeline, but from Mr. Nathan Harper's failed ventures. A low ripple of amusement swept the courtroom. Margaret took the stand next, her face the perfect mask of maternal sorrow. We tried to help her, she said tearfully, but she pushes us away. She imagines threats where there are none. Claire, unbothered, submitted Exhibit A, the Thanksgiving recording. Nathan's drunken voice played out across the courtroom speakers. Madeline thinks she's better than us. We'll show her. Margaret's voice could be heard egging him on. The gallery gasped. Savannah, Jenna's real name, testified next. Calmly, brutally, she described Margaret, telling her Madeline was unstable, that Nathan would handle her if needed. She described Nathan draining their joint account, calling her worthless, threatening violence. Finally, Claire submitted the DNA results. The judge flipped through the papers, her face impassive. Results confirm Madeline Harper is not the biological daughter of Derek Harper. Petitioners lack legal standing. Conservatorship petition is denied. Margaret stood so fast her chair screeched across the floor. This is slander. This is science, Claire said, voice like the crack of a gavel. The courtroom exploded into chaos, but for me, standing in the center of it all, there was only silence, sweet, victorious silence. Victory wasn't clean. It left a hollow ache in its wake, the way a house feels after the furniture has been stripped away. I stood on the courthouse steps, the rain misting against my skin, the judgment echoing in my ears. Conservatorship denied, fraud exposed, lies shattered, but the family that should have loved me was gone. Maybe they had never been real to begin with. Weeks passed. Life didn't snap back into place the way I thought it would. I boxed up old photo albums, shredded letters that once meant something, donated trinkets and heirlooms that no longer held power over me. My apartment grew barer by the day, each empty space a strange kind of freedom and a strange kind of grief. Claire met me at her office one last time, a bottle of good red wine and 2 heavy glasses waiting. We signed the final papers together, severing every last legal tie binding me to the Harper name. Are you sure about letting all this go? She asked as I sealed the last box, filled with faded awards, journals too painful to reread, scraps of a life spent surviving instead of living. I looked at the pile, felt the old wounds pulse once more, and then fade. It's not who I am anymore, I said quietly. Claire smiled, a rare softness in her sharp gaze. You could write a book, you know. People would eat it up. I laughed for the first time in what felt like months. At my desk that night, the idea wouldn't leave me alone. I opened a notebook, pen hovering over the blank page. Then I wrote, "This is not about revenge. This is about reclamation." Eli leaned over my shoulder, grinning. "There's your title," he said. And maybe for the first time it really was. Some wounds don't close with time. They close when you stop letting the people who made them keep carving into you. Weeks later, in a grocery store parking lot, life threw me one last curveball. I spotted her, Margaret, sitting alone in her car, the engine idling. She looked older somehow, smaller. The lines etched around her mouth were deeper now, carved by bitterness and fear. I could have walked away. I should have, but something made me stop. She rolled down the window, rain spattering between us. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Madeline," she said, almost a whisper. "I didn't know how to love you." Her eyes glistened with tears she might have once believed she could weaponize. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "You didn't keep me safe," I said softly. "You kept me small." A sob escaped her lips, sharp and ugly. "Do you hate me?" The old Madeline, the Madeline raised to swallow hurt and serve it back as silence, might have said no, might have lied to make her mother comfortable. But not this Madeline. Not anymore. "I don't hate you," I said calmly, "but I don't forgive you. Not yet." Her window rolled up slowly, like a curtain falling on a final, failed performance. I turned away, the weight sliding off my shoulders as easily as rain down a windshield. And this time I didn't look back. That night, an unknown number buzzed on my phone. No name, no message, just silence on the other end. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then blocked it. Without hesitation. without anger, without fear. Earlier that day, the district attorney's office had called. Nathan was facing wire fraud charges. Margaret was under investigation for perjury. Their empires of lies were crumbling, not because I screamed the loudest, but because I had stood the longest. At my desk, I opened my notebook again. The words poured out faster this time, steady and sure. I wrote for every woman who was told she was too much, too loud, too emotional. For every child erased to make room for a brother's failures. For every survivor who was forced to carry a family's shame like a second skin. I didn't burn their empire for revenge. I burned it to reclaim the girl they tried to erase and to build a life unapologetically mine. My name is Madeline Harper, and this is only the beginning.